Let's talk about something dark. Something that makes most of us uncomfortable. Cannibalism. It's a huge taboo. The idea of one person eating another feels like the ultimate violation, a line that separates us from animals. But what if that line isn't so clear? What if eating our own kind is part of our story, written deep in our bones? When we look back at our ancient ancestors, the hominins who came before us, we have to ask the question: were they cannibals? The simple answer is yes. The evidence is overwhelming. Across continents, across different species of early humans, for hundreds of thousands of years, our relatives ate each other. But the simple answer isn't the interesting one. The interesting part is the how and the why. It wasn't just one thing, it was complicated. Sometimes it was about hunger, sometimes it was about ritual, and sometimes it was probably about sheer brutal violence. This isn't a story about monsters. It's a story about survival, belief, and the difficult, often gruesome path that led to us. To understand this, you first have to understand how scientists can even tell. How can you look at a million-year-old bone and say, this person was eaten by another person? It's a kind of forensic science for the deep past. It's not just a guess. There are specific telltale signs they look for. The most obvious clue is cut marks. Think about a butcher preparing a steak. They use a knife to slice meat from the bone. Our ancient ancestors used stone tools. A sharp flake of flint leaves a very different mark than an animal's tooth. A carnivore's tooth might leave a puncture or a wide, U-shaped groove. A stone tool leaves a thin, sharp, V-shaped slice on the bone surface. Archaeologists have found these marks on countless animal bones at ancient campsites. It's how we know our ancestors hunted and butchered deer, bison, and mammoths. But the chilling thing is when they find those exact same marks on hominin bones, mixed in with the animal bones. The marks are in the same places you'd expect to see them if you were methodically stripping muscle from a limb. On the jaw to remove the tongue, on the thigh bones and upper arm bones where large muscles attach. It's a pattern, it's intentional. Then there's the breakage. One of the most calorie-rich parts of any animal is the marrow inside its long bones. Well, it's full of fat and nutrients. Ancient people knew this. They would lay a bone on a rock and smash it with a heavy stone, a hammerstone, to get at the marrow inside. This leaves a specific kind of fracture, a spiral break that follows the grain of the bone. When archaeologists find animal long bones smashed this way, they know our ancestors were getting every last calorie. And when they find human long bones at the same site smashed in the exact same way, the conclusion is hard to avoid. They weren't just killing each other, they were processing the bodies for food, just like any other animal. There are other, more subtle clues. Sometimes bones have a particular kind of polish on their broken edges. It's called pot polish. It comes from being tumbled around in a pot of boiling water. Boiling bones helps to extract grease and makes the last bits of tissue fall off. Finding a human bone fragment with pot polish suggests it was cooked in a stew. They have even found human teeth marks on human bones. It's rare, but it's the most direct evidence you can get. A person gnawing on the finger bone of another person. The most definitive proof, though, is incredibly hard to find. It's found in fossilized poop, or coprolites. In one archaeological site in Colorado from around 1150 AD, scientists found a coprolite left in a hearth. When they analyzed its chemical makeup, they found proteins specific to humans. Someone had eaten another person and then defecated into the fire. There's no other way to interpret that. It's the smoking gun of cannibalism, so the evidence is there. The question then becomes, who was doing it? And when? It seems to have been happening for a very, very long time. One of the earliest and clearest examples comes from a cave in Spain called Grandolina. The fossils, there are about 800,000 years old. They belong to a species called Homo antecessor, or pioneer man. They might be a common ancestor of both us and Neanderthals. In the cave, mixed in with the bones of horses and deer, were the bones of at least 11 Homo antecessor individuals. Most of them were children or teenagers, and their bones were a mess. They were covered in cut marks from stone tools. Their long bones were smashed open for marrow. Their skulls were broken, perhaps to get at the brain. They had been butchered and eaten with the same care and efficiency as the other animals found in the cave. The scientists who studied the site concluded it wasn't about starvation. There were plenty of other animal bones around. This seemed to be something else. Maybe it was a form of territorial violence. One group of Homo antecessor attacking and consuming another, not just to kill them, but to utterly dominate and remove them from the landscape. It was a strategy. The practice didn't stop with them. It was practically a tradition among our most famous cousins, the Neanderthals. For a long time, Neanderthals were painted as brutish, stupid cavemen. The idea that they were cannibals fit neatly into this ugly caricature. But as we've learned more, we know they were complex, intelligent people who buried their dead and cared for their sick. And yes, they also ate each other. A cave in France called Moula Guerci provides a grimly clear picture. About 100,000 years ago, a group of Neanderthals was eaten. The site is like a snapshot of a single event. The bones of at least 6 individuals, 2 adults, 2 teenagers, and 2 children were found scattered across the cave floor. Their remains were mixed with the bones of red deer, and the treatment was identical. The Neanderthal skulls were smashed, the tongues were cut out, the limb bones were cracked for marrow. The finger and toe bones show signs of being gnawed. The researchers compared the cut marks on the Neanderthal bones to the cut marks on the deer bones. They matched perfectly. It was textbook butchery. Another site in El Sidron, Spain, tells a similar story from about 50,000 years ago. Here, the remains of 12 Neanderthals were found. Again, all of them had been cannibalized. But this site gave us more detail. Because the bones were so well preserved, scientists were able to extract DNA. They determined that the 12 individuals were a family group, 3 adult males, 3 adult females, 3 teenagers, and 3 younger children. The adult males were all related to each other, but the adult females were not. This is a common pattern in human societies, where females move to live with their male partner's group. It suggests a family was attacked and eaten by a rival Neanderthal group, a complete eradication of a competing family. It's tempting to think this was just something our primitive relatives did. That once Homo sapiens, our own species, came along, we left such brutish behavior behind. But that's not true at all. The evidence for cannibalism among our direct ancestors is just as strong, and in some cases, even more bizarre. In a place called Gough's Cave in England, dating back about 15,000 years, archaeologists found one of the most compelling cases of Homo sapiens cannibalism. The remains of at least 5 people, including a 3-year-old child and 2 teenagers, were found mixed with animal bones and thousands of stone tools. Their bones were meticulously butchered. Cut marks, human tooth marks, and bones cracked for marrow were everywhere. But there was something else going on here. The skulls were handled differently. They were carefully cleaned of all flesh. Then, the base of the skulls was broken off and the edges were carefully shaped and smooth. They had been turned into cups or bowls. This wasn't just about food, this was a ritual. Making a drinking cup from an enemy's skull is a profound statement of victory and domination. The people at Gough's Cave were not just eating for survival, they were engaging in a complex, symbolic act. It shows that cannibalism wasn't just a response to hunger, it was woven into their culture, their beliefs, and their conflicts. This brings us to the most important question: why? Why did our ancestors and relatives do this? The reasons seem to fall into a few main categories, and they aren't mutually exclusive. An act of cannibalism could have multiple motivations at once. The most obvious reason is simple nutrition. People get hungry. In times of famine or extreme environmental stress, a human body is a source of protein and fat. We call this survival cannibalism. We have modern examples like the story of the Donner Party trapped in the mountains or the survivors of the Andes plane crash. It's a desperate act in a desperate situation. It's very likely that many instances of prehistoric cannibalism were just this. You're starving, a member of your group dies, or you manage to kill someone from a rival group. You can't afford to waste the calories, but a human body isn't actually a great food source compared to a large animal. A horse or a bison provides far more calories and is a lot less dangerous to hunt than another human who can fight back. So, nutrition alone doesn't seem to explain all of it, especially at sites where plenty of animal bones are found. This points to other reasons. This is where things get more complicated and more cultural. We can divide this kind of cannibalism into 2 types: eating outsiders, exocannibalism, and eating insiders, endocannibalism. Exocannibalism is eating your enemies. This seems to be what was happening at Grandolina and El Sidron. It's an act of ultimate aggression. You don't just defeat your rivals, you consume them. You absorb their strength, you desecrate their bodies, and you send a terrifying message to anyone else who might challenge you. The skull cups from Gough's Cave are a perfect example of this. It's about power. Endocannibalism is the opposite. It's the practice of eating members of your own social group, usually after they have died. This sounds strange to us, but it's often done out of respect, love, and a desire to maintain a connection with the dead. In this view, burying a loved one in the cold ground is a horrifying act of abandonment. Instead, by consuming a part of them, their spirit, their essence, or their knowledge is incorporated back into the family and the community. The body is not destroyed, but recycled among the people who love them. This is often called compassionate cannibalism. The four people of New Guinea practiced this kind of endocannibalism into the 20th century. When a person died, their female relatives would prepare and eat their body as part of the mourning ritual. It was an act of love. Unfortunately, this practice had a terrible consequence. It spread a fatal brain disease called kuru, which is similar to mad cow disease. The disease was transmitted through the consumption of infected brain tissue. The story of the foreign kuru is a powerful modern reminder of how deeply funerary cannibalism can be embedded in a culture, and how it can have unforeseen biological results. It's very difficult to tell from ancient bones whether the cannibalism was aggressive or compassionate. The cut marks for butchering an enemy might look exactly the same as the cut marks for preparing a loved one for a funeral meal. But sometimes there are clues. The absence of the most nutritious body parts might suggest that only certain parts were eaten for ritual reasons. The careful arrangement of bones might point away from a simple meal, but often it remains a mystery. Of course, there's always a debate. Science is never about 100% certainty. For almost every site where cannibalism is proposed, there are alternative explanations. Maybe the cut marks weren't from butchery, maybe they were part of a ritual to clean the bones for a special burial, where the flesh was removed but not eaten. This is certainly possible. How do you tell the difference? One way is to look for the other signs, like bones smashed for marrow. A ritual cleaning of a skeleton wouldn't require smashing every bone to pieces. Another argument is that animals might have been involved, maybe a human was killed, and then hyenas or other scavengers got to the body, chewing the bones and leaving marks. The archaeologists are very good at telling the difference between a stone tool cut and an animal tooth mark, but in a chaotic mix of bones, things can get confusing. There's also the problem of our own bias. For a long time, researchers were quick to label Neanderthals as cannibals because it fit the stereotype of them being savage brutes. It reinforced the idea that we, Homo sapiens, were superior. We have to be careful not to let our prejudices guide our interpretations of the evidence. But even with all these caveats, the evidence from dozens of sites is just too strong to ignore. Cannibalism was a real and recurring part of the human story. It wasn't an aberration. It was a behavioral strategy that our ancestors and relatives used for a variety of reasons. It was a solution to different kinds of problems, a lack of food, a rival group, or even the need to process grief and honor the dead. So, what does this all mean for us? It means that the tidy line we like to draw between us and them, between civilized humans and savage nature, is an illusion. The behaviors we find most repellent are not alien to our species, they are part of our heritage. We are not separate from the ruthless logic of survival that governs the natural world. And yet, the fact that we find it so repellent is also deeply significant. The overwhelming majority of human cultures throughout history have developed a powerful taboo against cannibalism. We decided collectively that this was a line not to be crossed. We built moral and ethical systems to prevent it. We told stories and created laws that defined it as the worst possible crime. Why? Maybe it's because stable societies depend on a basic level of trust. The fear that your neighbor might see you as food is not a good foundation for cooperation. Or maybe it's tied to our understanding of disease. Cultures that practice cannibalism, like the Four, paid a terrible price. Perhaps other groups learned that lesson the hard way, or maybe it's something deeper. Maybe as our capacity for empathy and abstract thought grew, the idea of treating another person, a being with a mind, a family, and a story, as mere meat became morally impossible. Our taboo against cannibalism might be a monument to our own evolving humanity. The story of ancient cannibalism is not a simple tale of bloodthirsty monsters. It's a complex and unsettling look into the human condition. It shows us that our ancestors were capable of both great tenderness and shocking brutality. They were survivors, adapting to a harsh world with every tool they had, including their teeth. Acknowledging this dark chapter in our past doesn't diminish us, it makes our story more complete. It reminds us that our humanity, with all its compassion and all its rules, was not a given. And it was built piece by piece over a very long and sometimes very bloody history. The bones don't lie. They tell us who we were, and in doing so, they help us understand who we are.